I met a man once who had everything going for him. Sharp mind, good family, decent job, plenty of opportunities knocking at his door. But when I saw him 20 years later, he looked like life had beaten him down. His shoulders were slumped, his eyes had lost that spark. And when we talked, all he could do was tell me about the things he wished he'd done differently. The business he never started, the relationship he never fought for, the risks he never took. He said something that still haunts me today. Jim, I'm not upset about the things I tried and failed at. I'm dying inside because of all the things I never tried at all. That conversation changed how I think about success and failure. See, most people worry about making mistakes, about falling flat on their faces, about what others might think if they don't succeed. But the real tragedy isn't in our failures. The real tragedy is in our unused potential, in the dreams we never chase, in the necessary actions we keep putting off until tomorrow, and tomorrow never comes. Let me tell you about a moment in my own life that taught me this lesson the hard way. I was 25 years old, working a job that paid the bills but didn't feed my soul. I had this idea, this vision of starting my own business, helping people improve their lives, but every time I got close to taking that first step, I'd find an excuse. Not enough money. Not the right time. What if I fail? What if people laugh at me? What if I'm not smart enough, experienced enough, good enough? For months, I carried that dream around like a stone in my pocket. Heavy, present, uncomfortable. I knew what I needed to do. I needed to quit making excuses and start making moves. I needed to force myself to take that first scary step into the unknown. But knowing what you need to do and actually doing it are two completely different things, aren't they? Here's what I've learned in all my years of studying successful people and watching unsuccessful people. We all know what needs to be done. The overweight person knows they need to exercise. The person drowning in debt knows they need to spend less and earn more. The unhappy employee knows they need to either improve their situation or find a new one. The person in a toxic relationship knows they need to have that difficult conversation or walk away. We know. But knowing isn't doing. The space between knowing and doing is where most people spend their entire lives. It's comfortable there, safe. You can dream about what could be without risking what you have. You can complain about your circumstances without taking responsibility for changing them. You can stay exactly where you are and convince yourself that you're being practical, being smart, being realistic. But let me ask you something. How's that working out for you? How's it feeling to carry around all those things you know you should do but haven't done yet? How's it sitting with you to go to bed each night knowing you spent another day avoiding the very actions that could transform your life? I call it the weight of what we don't do. And it gets heavier every single day we don't do something about it. Every day you don't make that phone call, it gets a little harder to pick up the phone. Every day you don't start that project, it becomes a little more overwhelming in your mind. Every day you don't have that conversation, the distance between you and the other person grows a little wider. The truth is, avoidance is a drug. It gives you temporary relief from discomfort, but the underlying problem keeps growing. It's like taking a painkiller for a broken bone. Sure, it stops hurting for a while, but the bone isn't healing. In fact, you might be making it worse by continuing to use it. I've watched people create the most elaborate systems of avoidance you can imagine. They'll reorganize their entire office to avoid making sales calls. They'll research every detail about a business opportunity for months without ever taking action on what they learn. And they'll read every relationship book on the shelf, but never actually sit down and talk honestly with their partner about what's not working. These aren't lazy people. These aren't stupid people. These are intelligent, capable human beings who have convinced themselves that preparation is the same as participation. But preparation without action is just procrastination wearing a suit and tie. The most successful people I know aren't necessarily the most talented or the most educated or the ones who had the best opportunities handed to them. They're the ones who learned to force themselves to do what's necessary, even when they didn't feel like it, even when they were scared, even when they couldn't guarantee the outcome. You see, there's a fundamental difference between those who succeed and those who don't. and it has nothing to do with intelligence or luck or circumstances. The difference is this. Successful people have developed the ability to force themselves to do what unsuccessful people won't do. They've learned to override their natural tendency toward comfort and convenience. They've trained themselves to take necessary action regardless of how they feel in the moment. And that brings us to the heart of what we're talking about here. Life doesn't care about your feelings. Life doesn't care if you're in the mood, or if the timing feels right, or if you feel confident enough. Life rewards action. Life rewards people who do what's necessary when it's necessary, not when it's convenient. So the question isn't whether you know what needs to be done. The question is whether you're willing to force yourself to do it anyway. Because everything you want is on the other side of doing the things you've been avoiding. Your better health, your financial freedom, your meaningful relationships, your sense of purpose and fulfillment, they're all waiting for you to stop waiting and start acting. The weight of what we don't do eventually becomes heavier than the difficulty of doing what we must do. The pain of discipline weighs ounces, but the pain of regret weighs tons. And regret is a terrible thing to carry into your final years. Wondering what could have been if only you had forced yourself to do what was necessary when it mattered most. Now let me tell you about the day I learned what it really means to force yourself forward. I was 30 years old, and I had just made a commitment to read 30 minutes every single day. Sounds simple enough, right? But on day 3, I came home exhausted, turned on the television, and completely forgot about my reading commitment. Day 4, same thing. By day 7, I was ready to give up on the whole idea. But then something happened that changed everything. I was putting on my shoes to go to work, and I saw that book sitting on my nightstand. And I got angry, not at the book, but at myself. I realized that if I couldn't keep a simple 30-minute commitment to myself, how could I expect to keep bigger commitments to other people? How could I expect to build a business, maintain relationships, or create any kind of meaningful success if I couldn't even force myself to read for half an hour? So, I did something that felt extreme at the time, but looking back, it was one of the smartest things I ever did. I made a rule. No breakfast until I read. No morning coffee until I read. No leaving the house until I read. I created what I call a forcing mechanism, a system that made it harder not to do what I committed to than it was to just do it. That's when I discovered something powerful. Successful people don't rely on motivation to do what's necessary. They create systems that force them to take action regardless of how they feel. Motivation is like the weather. It comes and goes and you can't control it. But systems you can control. Systems work whether you feel like it or not. Here's what most people get backwards. They think, motivation comes first, then action follows. They wait to feel inspired, energized, ready. But here's the truth that changed my life. Action creates motivation, not the other way around. You start moving, and then you start feeling like moving. You begin the work, and then you begin to enjoy the work. I learned this from watching a friend of mine who became incredibly successful in real estate. He told me his secret wasn't that he loved making cold calls to potential clients. In fact, he hated it. But every morning before he could check his email, before he could read the newspaper, before he could do anything else, he had to make 10 phone calls. He said, "Jim, by call number 3, I start feeling better about it. By call number 7, I'm getting into a rhythm. By call number 10, I'm actually excited about the next 10. That's the compound effect of forcing yourself to do what's necessary. Each small action builds momentum for the next action. Each time you override your resistance, you make it a little easier to override it next time. Each moment you choose discipline over comfort, you're literally rewiring your brain to default toward action instead of avoidance. But let's get practical here. How do you actually force yourself to do what you know needs to be done? Because knowing the principle and applying the principle are two different things. First, you have to get honest about your patterns of resistance. What are your favorite excuses? What are the stories you tell yourself when you want to avoid taking necessary action? For some people, it's, "I don't have enough time." For others, it's, "I'm not ready yet," or "I need to learn more first," or "the timing isn't right." I had a student once who wanted to start a consulting business. She spent 2 years getting ready. She took courses, read books, attended seminars, created the perfect business plan, designed beautiful business cards, built an elaborate website, but she never actually reached out to a single potential client. When I asked her why, she said she needed to be absolutely certain she could deliver excellent results before she started. Here's what I told her, and here's what I'm telling you. You'll never feel ready. Readiness is not a feeling you wait for, it's a decision you make. You don't get ready and then take action. You take action and then you get ready through the experience of taking action. So she set herself a forcing mechanism. She committed to having 5 conversations with potential clients every week, no matter what. Not 5 proposals, not 5 meetings, just 5 conversations. She made it impossible for herself to hide behind preparation. Within 6 weeks, she had her first client. Within 6 months, she was making more money than she ever had in her corporate job. The key was removing the option to not act. When you leave yourself an escape route, you'll take it 99 times out of 100. When you eliminate the escape route, you find a way forward. Another technique that works powerfully is what I call environmental design. You arrange your surroundings to make the right choices easier and the wrong choices harder. If you want to exercise in the morning, you lay out your workout clothes the night before and put your alarm clock across the room. If you want to eat healthier, you remove junk food from your house and fill your refrigerator with good options. If you want to read more, you put books everywhere and hide the television remote. You're not relying on willpower in the moment of decision. You're using your clear thinking in advance to set up your distracted, tired, or unmotivated future self for success. I also learned the power of accountability from a mentor who changed my life. He told me something I'll never forget. Jim, private commitments are easily broken, but public commitments have staying power. When you tell other people what you're going to do, you create external pressure to follow through. Your reputation becomes part of the equation. But here's something even more powerful than external accountability: learning to keep commitments to yourself. Every time you say you're going to do something and then don't do it, you're training yourself not to trust your own word. Every time you follow through on a commitment to yourself, you're building self-trust and self-respect. Start small. Don't try to revolutionize your entire life overnight. Pick one thing, one necessary action you've been avoiding, and create a simple system to force yourself to do it consistently. Maybe it's making one important phone call every day, or writing for 15 minutes every morning, or having one difficult conversation every week. The magic isn't in the size of the action. It's in the consistency of taking action despite not feeling like it. Because once you prove to yourself that you can force yourself to do small, necessary things, you start believing you can force yourself to do bigger, necessary things. And that's when your life really begins to change. You see, the ability to force yourself forward isn't just a skill you use occasionally. It becomes the foundation of everything else you want to accomplish. It's the bridge between where you are and where you want to be. And like any skill, the more you practice it, the stronger it gets. You know, I've always been fascinated by the way nature operates. There's a rhythm to it, a timing that never fails. Spring comes when it's supposed to come, not when it's convenient. Summer arrives right on schedule, whether we're ready or not. And here's what's remarkable. Nature doesn't negotiate with the seasons. An apple tree doesn't say, "You know what? I don't feel like blooming this year. Maybe I'll wait until next spring when I'm more motivated." But we humans, we try to negotiate with life all the time. We want spring results without doing spring work. We want summer growth without summer consistency. We want autumn harvest without putting in the effort when it mattered most. And then we wonder why our lives don't flourish the way they should. Let me tell you about the seasons of necessity. Because once you understand this, everything about forcing yourself to take action starts to make sense. Every goal you have, every dream you're chasing, every problem you need to solve goes through these seasons. And each season has its own necessary work that can't be postponed, can't be skipped, and can't be done out of order. Spring is the season of starting. It's when you plant seeds, when you begin new ventures, when you learn new skills. Spring activities are all about potential and possibility. This is when you force yourself to make that first phone call, write that first page, take that first class, have that first difficult conversation. I remember when I decided to become a speaker. It was spring in my life, and I knew I had to plant some seeds. But let me tell you, forcing myself to stand up in front of that first audience was terrifying. I was shaking so badly I could barely hold my notes. But I did it anyway, because spring waits for no one. If you don't plant in spring, you don't eat in autumn. It's that simple. The necessary work of spring requires courage more than skill. You don't need to be perfect, you just need to begin. You don't need to have it all figured out, you just need to take the first step. But here's what trips people up. They want to feel ready before they start. But readiness comes from starting, not before it. I had a friend who wanted to write a book for 15 years. Every spring he'd talk about starting it. He'd buy notebooks, set up a writing space, make detailed outlines, but he never actually wrote the first chapter because he was waiting to feel like a real writer. Finally, I said to him, "You don't become a writer by feeling like one. You become a writer by writing." That year, he forced himself to write 2 pages every single day, no matter what. 12 months later, he had his book. Then comes summer, the season of growth and consistency. Summer work is about showing up every single day, whether you feel like it or not. It's about maintaining the disciplines, nurturing what you've planted, and staying the course when the initial excitement wears off. Summer is often the hardest season because it's when most people quit. The novelty is gone. The results aren't dramatic yet, and the daily grind starts to feel, well, like a grind. This is when you force yourself to keep going, even when progress seems slow, even when nobody's watching, even when you start questioning whether it's worth it. I learned about summer necessity the hard way when I was building my first business. The spring enthusiasm had worn off, and I was in that long middle stretch where every day felt like pushing a boulder uphill. I remember one particularly discouraging week when nothing seemed to be working. I was tempted to give up to try something easier, something with faster results. But then I remembered something my mentor told me. "Jim, summer is when character's built and fortunes are made." Anyone can start something in spring when they're excited, but only the people who do summer work get to enjoy autumn harvest. So I forced myself to keep making those calls, keep improving my skills, keep serving my clients, even when I couldn't see how it would all add up. I created what I called my summer discipline. Every single day, I would do at least one thing to move my business forward, no matter how small, no matter how I felt. That's the secret of summer work. It's not about massive action, it's about consistent action. It's about doing a little bit every day rather than trying to do everything all at once. Because in summer, it's the daily rain that makes things grow, not the occasional storm. Then comes autumn, the season of harvesting results and making tough decisions. Autumn work is about reaping what you've sown, but it's also about cutting away what isn't working. This is when you force yourself to have honest conversations about what's producing results and what's just taking up space. Autumn requires a different kind of courage than spring. In spring, you need courage to begin. In autumn, you need courage to cut losses, to make hard choices, to say goodbye to things that aren't serving you anymore. I've seen people ruin their harvest because they couldn't force themselves to make necessary autumn decisions. I knew a business owner who spent 5 years building a company that was marginally profitable, but consuming all his time and energy. Every autumn, the numbers told him he should either dramatically change direction or shut it down and start something new. But he couldn't force himself to make that tough call because he'd invested so much time and effort. He kept hoping things would magically improve without any major changes. Finally, his wife sat him down and said, "Honey, you're not farming anymore. You're just maintaining a beautiful garden that doesn't feed the family." That autumn conversation forced him to close the business and start fresh. Within 2 years, his new venture was more successful than the old one ever was. Autumn work also means celebrating your wins and acknowledging how far you've come. Too many people are so focused on what's next that they never stop to appreciate what they've accomplished. You have to force yourself to harvest the satisfaction and confidence that comes from completing what you started. And then there's winter, the season of rest, reflection, and preparation. Winter work is about looking back at what worked and what didn't, planning for the next cycle, and preparing yourself for the next spring. This is when you force yourself to be honest about your performance, to learn from your mistakes, and to get ready for new opportunities. Most people try to skip winter. They want to go straight from one harvest to the next planting without taking time to reflect and prepare. But winter isn't wasted time, it's investment time. It's when you sharpen your tools, study your results, and plan your next move. I spend every December doing winter work. I review the year, celebrate the victories, acknowledge the failures, and plan for what's coming next. I force myself to ask hard questions. What did I do well? What could I have done better? What opportunities did I miss? What patterns do I need to change? Here's the crucial thing about seasons. They each have their own timing, and that timing isn't negotiable. You can't do spring work in autumn and expect it to produce results. You can't skip summer work and expect an autumn harvest. You can't avoid winter reflection and expect to be prepared for spring opportunities. The people who succeed are the ones who recognize what season they're in and force themselves to do the work that season requires. They don't try to harvest in spring or plant in winter. They align their actions with the natural rhythm of growth and results. So ask yourself, what season are you in right now? What's the necessary work of this season that you've been avoiding? Because once you understand the seasons of necessity, you can stop fighting against the natural order of things and start working with it instead. Let me tell you about two men I knew who started their careers around the same time in the same industry with remarkably similar backgrounds and opportunities. Both were intelligent, both had supportive families, both had access to the same training and resources, but their lives took completely different paths. And the difference came down to one simple thing: their relationship with doing what was necessary. The first man, let's call him Robert, had a habit of forcing himself to do what needed to be done, even when it was uncomfortable. When he needed to make difficult phone calls, he made them. When he needed to have tough conversations with employees, he had them. When market conditions changed and he needed to adapt his business model, he did it quickly and decisively. When his health started declining in his 40s, he immediately changed his diet and exercise habits, even though he loved his old lifestyle. Robert wasn't naturally more disciplined than anyone else. In fact, he told me he struggled with the same resistance we all feel. But somewhere along the way, he had learned that the temporary discomfort of doing what's necessary was always less painful than the long-term consequences of avoiding it. The second man, let's call him David, was equally capable, but had developed the habit of putting off necessary actions. He would delay difficult conversations until they became crisis. He would avoid making tough business decisions until his competitors had already moved ahead. When his doctor warned him about his health, he promised to start exercising and eating better next month. He always had good reasons for waiting: better timing, more information, less stress in his life. 25 years later, when I saw both men at a reunion, the contrast was striking. Robert had built a thriving business, maintained excellent health, and had deep, meaningful relationships with his family and friends. When people talked about him, they used words like reliable, decisive, and trustworthy. He had become the kind of person others came to for advice and leadership. David, on the other hand, was struggling. His business had never reached his potential because he consistently missed windows of opportunity. His health had deteriorated because he kept postponing the lifestyle changes he knew he needed to make. His relationships were strained because important issues had been left unrest for years. He wasn't a bad person. He was just carrying the accumulated weight of thousands of small avoidances. Here's what I learned from watching these two men. Doing what's necessary isn't just about achieving goals or solving problems. It's about who you become in the process. Every time you force yourself to take necessary action, you're not just changing your circumstances, you're changing your character. You're becoming the kind of person who can be counted on, who follows through, who faces reality and deals with it. And here's the remarkable thing: other people sense this about you. They may not be able to articulate what it is, but they know you're different. They trust you with bigger responsibilities because they've seen you handle smaller ones. They seek your advice because they respect your judgment. They want to do business with you because they know you'll do what you say you'll do. This creates what I call the compound effect of character. Each time you choose discipline over convenience, you're making deposits into your reputation, not just with others, but with yourself. Each time you force yourself to do what's necessary, you're proving to yourself that you're the kind of person who can be relied upon when things get difficult. But there's something even more powerful at work here. When you consistently do what's necessary, you start to influence the people around you. Your children watch how you handle difficult situations and learn what it means to be responsible. Your employees see your example and raise their own standards. Your friends are inspired by your growth and start examining their own habits. I think about my own journey and how learning to force myself to do what's necessary changed not just my life, but the lives of my family members. When my children were growing up, they saw me getting up early to read, making difficult phone calls, having honest conversations about problems instead of hoping they'd go away. I didn't lecture them about discipline. I just lived it. And years later, they tell me those examples shaped how they approached their own challenges. That's the true legacy of doing what's necessary. It ripples outward in ways you may never fully realize. The difficult conversation you force yourself to have might save a relationship that affects multiple generations. The business decision you make today might create opportunities for dozens of employees and their families. The health changes you implement now might mean you're around to see your grandchildren grow up. But let's be honest about what stands in the way. The biggest obstacle isn't lack of knowledge or even lack of ability. The biggest obstacle is fear. Fear of failure, fear of success, fear of judgment, fear of change, fear of discomfort. We create elaborate stories about why we can't take necessary action. But underneath all those stories is usually just fear. The successful people I've studied don't have less fear than unsuccessful people. They've just learned to act in spite of fear. They've discovered that courage isn't the absence of fear. It's feeling the fear and forcing yourself forward. Anyway, here's a framework I want to give you for overcoming that fear and starting to build this discipline in your own life. I call it the 3 questions test. Before you avoid any necessary action, ask yourself these 3 questions. First, what will happen if I do this? Think through the realistic consequences of taking action. Yes, there might be some discomfort, some risk, some uncertainty. Most of the time, we discover that our fears are much bigger than the actual risks. What are the real costs of continued avoidance? It might be a conversation, a decision, a phone call, a lifestyle change, or a new beginning. Something specific that you know would improve your life if you just forced yourself to do it. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before you have coffee, before you do anything else, take action on that one thing. Don't negotiate with yourself. Don't wait for motivation. Don't look for perfect conditions. Just force yourself to do it. And then notice how you feel afterward. Notice the sense of relief, the boost in confidence, the momentum it creates for the rest of your day. That feeling you'll have, that's what it feels like to be someone who does what's necessary instead of what's convenient. Because here's the truth I want you to remember long after you've forgotten everything else I've said today. Everything you want in life is waiting on the other side of doing what you've been avoiding. Your better health, your financial freedom, your meaningful relationships, your sense of purpose and fulfillment, they're all there, waiting for you to stop waiting and start acting. The time for excuses is over. The time for delays is done. The time for doing what's necessary is right now. And the person who can force you to take that first step, that person is looking back at you in the mirror. Make the choice. Take the action. Become the person you're capable of being. Because in the end, we're not judged by our intentions or our plans or our good reasons for waiting. We're judged by what we actually do when it matters most. And it matters most, right.